It's Halloween, so that means it's time for some spooky shit. So I decided to do something a little different today. I was rewatching YMS's childhood trauma videos, and I thought, hey, we both make videos about movies, and we both have eerily similar acronyms. Might as well just do that too. I'm sure you all know that I'm a pretty big fan of horror movies and other scary things, but I was kind of a bitch as a kid. Like, yeah, I enjoyed the adrenaline rush of being absolutely petrified, but I also scared very, very easily. And let me tell you, I always regretted it when I laid awake at night waiting for whatever lied in the dark to come for me. When I was about 4, I remember being scared shitless of Halloween because of the scary ads and creepy decorations and all that. I didn't go to preschool, and my parents basically kept me at home at all times, so I didn't really have much interaction with other kids. So when trick-or-treating time came around and I saw my parents opening the door to some tiny motherfucker in an orange jack-o'-lantern demon mask and a plastic scythe, my first instinct was to run away shrieking and hide my head under a pillow and hope whatever the fuck that was would go away. Which brings us to this video. I'm gonna go over a few pieces of media I watched as a kid that tortured my nightmares for countless sleepless nights. Happy Halloween, everyone. I remember being a big fan of Ben 10 as a kid. I mean, it makes sense. It was about a kid who transforms into aliens, fighting other aliens. A snotty, smelly little boy like me would love that shit. A kid version of me would love it too. I don't really remember much of it beyond just liking it, except for one particular episode. Well, one part of an episode, but I'll talk about the whole thing for the sake of context. The episode I'm talking about is Dr. Animo and the Mutant Ray. It opens up in a swamp. They're apparently waiting for something called Gator Fest. I'd go there, I love gators. Ben is fucking around with his watch and his cousin Gwen and Max tell him to stop. Wait a second. Max sounds familiar. Is that Colonel?
Tomorrow, this place will be crawling with Gator Fest fans.
Oh heck, it's like some kind of dinosaur theme park.
So Ben breaks the watch and he explodes into a green burst of energy as... Oh yeah, that brings back memories. I'm gonna speed through this because I got more shit to talk about. Gatorfest happens, Dr. Amino, a recurring villain, pulls up and attacks Ben 10. He finds out that the Omnitrix watch cover thing can mutate living organisms, so he steals it. Oh, and Ben turns into hybrids of his normal aliens now. Amino then creates a flaming bat that attacks the gang, and this eventually leads them to his mutant ray. He fires the ray at Ben, but Max pushes him out of the way. This brings me to the part that scared me as a kid. Please, God, take it away. Make it stop. I'll be good. I'll never jerk off to Fortnite big booty compilations ever again. Just take it away from me. This shit brought me so many nightmares as a kid. I used to dream about everyone in my family turning into this fucking thing. These few seconds of footage scarred me for weeks. Anyway, they fight and they reverse everything through some weird bullshit cartoon logic, whatever. The episode ended, but my countless sleepless nights didn't. Moving on. SpongeBob SquarePants was a show I watched every chance I got. I fucking love that shit. It's to the point where I can't even look at it without some thick red-tinted glasses. Watching the old episodes now makes me go back to the feeling of watching them for the first time as a child. But there was one particular episode that shivered me timbers as a wee lad. Looking back at it now, it's not a very scary episode, and in fact, it's one that I look back at quite fondly, despite the nightmares tied to it. Considering this one is pretty much a classic, it doesn't need much of an introduction, but I'll do it for you Zoomers out there. It shouldn't take too long anyway, it's pretty short. Mr. Krabs decides to open the Krusty Krab for 24 hours because he really likes money. Naturally, Squidward is not happy with this, but Spongebob, being the soy-infused wage cuck he is, was excited. Squidward decides to fuck with him by telling him a story of a former Krusty Krab employee who carelessly chopped his own arm off and replaced it with a rusty spatula. I guess this is the Natrum of the SpongeBob world. According to Squidward's tale, he was run over by a bus and killed. He is known, as we all amiably remember, as the hash-slinging slasher. His arrival is heralded by 3 things. Heralded? What the fuck am I doing? Giving a sermon about the rapture? You know he's coming when the lights flicker on and off, followed by a phone call with no one on the other end. Finally, he arrives on the bus that had killed him, crossing the street without looking both ways, what a fucking gangster, and knocks on the door with his spatula hand. And as he creeps towards you, he gets you, as the show says. But I knew it meant that he was gonna find you and goatsy your ass. With a spatula for a hand, I'd imagine it wouldn't make for a gratifying sexual experience, or it might awaken something in me. Terrifying in either scenario. Not long after, the very things that Squidward mentioned begin happening, and even he starts shitting his pants. It's at that point Kid Me is primed for something crazy to happen. And it happens. He arrives. I'm ready to close my eyes to avoid watching anymore. And then it turns out he's just a dude who wanted to apply for a job. That was it. My heart was still racing from the fear, but I couldn't help but be disappointed. Oh, my sweet summer child. It's not over yet.
Nosferatu!
Even now, Nosferatu sends shivers down my spine. Great film, by the way. The design is genuinely unsettling, and the memories attached to the fear I felt upon first seeing him enhance those feelings. Although now, I mostly just find it cool and novel that a late 90s to early 2000s kids show referenced a classic German expressionist horror film from 1922. And this brings me to the main event, the piece of media that horrified me the most growing up. It's a film whose existence I had entirely forgotten, only for it to be rediscovered by me trying to track it down for this very video. Steven Spielberg's AI Artificial Intelligence. I remember basically nothing about this film beyond how horrified I was by it and how I ended up being traumatized another way by the end. Reading up on it now though, I'm mostly just excited to see it through the lens of an adult. This film was originally meant to be a Stanley Kubrick piece, but he passed it off to Spielberg due to his belief that he couldn't do it justice because he thought that the protagonist, the AI in question, needed to be CGI. And considering it was the mid-90s, Kubrick wanted to wait for CGI technology to advance a little further. However, the film wouldn't be made for several years and was released in 2001, 2 years after his death. Now, I'm a huge fan of Kubrick, and I really enjoy Spielberg's work, so this sounds right up my alley. This isn't going to be a proper review, so I'll just skim through a lot of the plot, except for the context for the specific scenes I want to talk about. Obviously, this means spoilers. This film opens up with your standard sci-fi exposition dump. In this world, the polar ice caps have melted, and many major world cities are now completely submerged in water, including New York. Now that's what I call an improvement. Robots have become a major mainstay in the economy because they didn't consume any resources after they had been manufactured. And this is where we are introduced to our first robot, which is being presented in some board meeting. The person giving a presentation to the scene demonstrates how robots feel pain and then proceed to show off her robotic brain. Ugh, I remember why this scared me as a kid. It isn't so bad now, but trust me, it gets worse from here. And this is where we get our premise. What if we created a robot capable of human love? A machine child who loves its chosen parent unconditionally. Cut to almost 2 years later, and we're introduced to a couple whose kid is in a vegetative state, and he isn't getting any better. The company in charge of making the robo-kids decides that this is the best test case for an AI that is capable of love. The father agrees, thinking it could cheer the mother up. The little boy, David, is a weird-ass motherfucker considering he's a robot who knows nothing by this point, and he's kind of creepy. But after some deliberation and pondering, the mom ends up agreeing to keep him, and he imprints himself on her. And no, it's not like in Twilight where Jacob wants to fuck the baby. What the fuck is wrong with you, Stephanie Meyer? In this film, imprinting activates the love algorithm, and so he sees her as his real mother now. Some more time goes by and he gets a robot Teddy friend.
Teddy, this is David.
Hello, Teddy.
Hello, David.
David.
Ugh, this guy is unsettling. Eventually, the couple's carrot son stops being a carrot, and he seems to be jealous of the existence of David, so he starts to fuck with him. For example, this scene that scarred me so fucking hard that I remembered the image even after forgetting the movie even existed. The kid basically dares him to eat spinach, and considering the fact that David is a robot, this doesn't end well. The way his face melted off still sends a visceral reaction as I remember the first time I saw this happen. At that point in my childhood, I loved eating spinach because of Popeye, but this scene made me give up spinach for quite some time. Even though I knew he was a robot, my childish imagination couldn't remove the possibility of my face melting off as I ate. Anyway, eventually David nearly ends up drowning the son due to an accidental defense mechanism activation. This leads to the parents deciding he's too dangerous to keep around, and so the mother drives him to the wood and tells him to run because she doesn't have the heart to have him dismantled. This isn't related to any of the scary stuff, but this scene is genuinely harrowing. We're then introduced to a new character, Gigolo Joe. He's a robot prostitute. Really not sure why I was allowed to watch this as a kid. Due to some unfortunate coincidence, he ends up being convicted of murder and ends up fleeing into, you guessed it, the same woods as David. While David is deciding how to become real so that his mother could really love him, he stumbles on a dump of robotic parts, and a bunch of fucked up broken ass robots come in to replace their old parts. Every single one of these robots are horrifying in their own way, and I'm sure little old me got some creative ass nightmares from this scene. Plus the fact that they can just remove body parts so easily didn't help at all. I wish I could say the scene ended here. I wish I could say this is as scary as it got, but no, it gets worse. The robots, including David and Joe, get captured by humans to be sent somewhere called a flesh fair. The name alone is quite grotesque. A flesh fair is literally just people watching robots getting tortured and murdered, and we get an extended 15-minute sequence of all these awful things happening. Now I know why I didn't remember this movie, my young mind repressed it for my own good. Eventually they're let go because David is so lifelike that it got people to realize that, wait, this is kinda fucked up, huh? At this point Joe decides to help him as thanks for saving his life. David decides that the only way he can become a real boy is through the Blue Fairy, not realizing that it's nothing more than a fairy tale. However, after going to a really cool cyberpunk city, he finds out the location of the Blue Fairy. It's in underwater Manhattan. He goes there and it turns out he was basically tricked into going to his manufacturer. Here, he finds out that he's not unique, he's just another product. He starts having an existential crisis and eventually leaps off a building into the sea below. You and me both, pal. He gets saved by Joe, who gets arrested, but David finds a statue of the Blue Fairy, and he stays there praying until the world freezes over and 2,000 years pass. Humanity is extinct. Only advanced, almost organic machines remain. By this point, they're so evolved that they're more like cosmic beings. They find David and decide to thaw him out and learn about humanity through him. They want him to be happy, so they create his home from his memories, and through some reasons that are unimportant for this particular video, they manage to revive David's mother. But they warn him that revived people can only survive for about 12 hours or so. Once they fall asleep, they die and there's no bringing them back. This may sound like nonsense, but the logic of the film is quite sound. I'm just not getting into it because it wouldn't really have much to do with the topic of the video. Now, you may remember I mentioned being quite traumatized by the end. Well, here it is. The end isn't scary in the slightest. In fact, it's quite beautiful and sweet. David spends a day with his mother for the first time in 2,000 years, and as she begins to fall asleep, rapidly approaching death, she tells David that she loves him, the one thing that he wanted to hear from her his whole life. And the movie ends. She's dead, but David finally got his mother's love. I remember this scene made me cry my fucking eyes out as a kid. And I'm not gonna lie, it kinda got to me now. AI Artificial Intelligence was a very disturbing film for a child, but rewatching it now was an absolute treat. This is a great film, which isn't something I can say often when revisiting things I watched as a kid. And there you have it, a small glimpse into what scared me as a kid. I had a really great time watching all of these old childhood favorites, plus AI, and I hope the end result was at least somewhat enjoyable. Thanks for watching, and of course, happy Halloween.